right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. It is time now to speak with Congressman Richard Nugent. U.S. Representative Richard Nugent is on the phone. Let me tell you the date so that you know if you're listening to a live show or not. Today's date is Monday, November 18th. 2013. If that's the date on your calendar for today, then you're listening to a live show, and Congressman Nugent is on the phone to answer your questions. He was in the news this morning for his vote against, I think he's going to correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure, with the minimum wage increase, the federal minimum wage increase. And I know some of you agreed with that decision and some of you didn't agree. But the whole idea here is you get to chat with Congressman Nugent and tell him your thoughts on things happening in our government up in Washington, D.C. It's an honor to be able to say we can call him a friend, and you are all invited to call him right now on the phone. The number is 622-9622. That's 622-WOCA. And again, today's date is November 18th, 2013, just so you know if you're listening to a live show or not. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Larry. Thanks so much for having me on. And, yeah, I do want to correct you. There was no vote on the minimum wage. It is something that's floating around up in D.C., and I was asked my opinion on it. And in a way, you know, my feeling is I truly believe the states are the ones that should be setting the minimum wage because they can go above the federal guideline, and I think 24 states have already done that. And Florida's one of those.
Florida is one of them, yeah.
It really is, I think, a state issue because, you know, who better to decide, you know, what the needs are as it relates to minimum wage? Because, you know, they know what's in their state, you know, cost of living and all those things.
I mean, if you put together the obligation that small businesses have now because of the Health Care Act, combined with a higher wage that they can't really afford to pay their people, ultimately the one who suffers is the person at the bottom.
And that's true. I mean, we've already seen where they're, you know, cutting back hours to stay under the threshold as it relates to Obamacare, and that in and of itself is a problem because, I mean, you know, folks typically need the 40 hours of pay. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, the theory is that if you increase the minimum wage, you know, quite a bit, like they're talking about doing, almost $1 a year, I believe, 3 years, it's going to get passed back to somebody. So if you're a consumer, the consumer's going to pay for it. Sooner or later, somebody's going to pay for it. And the end of the day is, it's going to, you know, cause to hire less people. Yeah.
So when the media, a newspaper reporter, asks you such a question, do you feel like it's a loaded question? Or do you think I would be so... Oh man, I'd be walking on ice if I were you. People, they want to ask you a question to trap you or to make you look like you're not caring or something. Does it feel that way from your perspective?
Well, every once in a while it does. You know, I will tell you that that has not necessarily been the case. You know, Mike Thompson, who wrote this article, is definitely not that type of reporter, at least in my estimation. But, you know, people have a right to ask a question, particularly since it's something that could come up on the radar screen up in D.C., and it is a philosophical question for me, is the fact that I think the states are in a better position to determine what the minimum wage should be within their boundaries.
Right.
If you have a one-size-fits-all, I think that's a problem. It's problematic for all of us.
Okay, and I think you have a phone call coming in. Good morning. Thank you for being on the air with us. You're on the air with Congressman Richard Nugent.
Good morning, Congressman. This is Sonny calling.
Good morning.
It was reported on the radio the other day that the tax income or revenue income this year and next year will be higher than anticipated, and yet we have to increase the debt limit or extend the debt limit. Why is it so impossible for a government to realize that we don't have the money? Just simply because Bernanke and now Yellen or whatever her name is, that we can still continue putting zeros behind that poor little one that's somewhere out in space. But the thing is, when do we ever stop the spending? And why is it I myself and everybody I talk to realizes that the spending is ridiculous, and there's no need for it other than people that have no idea of what they're doing in office. And I would like your response to that, and I'll hang up and listen. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Sonny. When you look at what the federal government budget, what we vote on every year is about 34% of the actual spend. And, when we cut the spending from discretionary, which we've done in the last 3 years that I've been up there, for the first time ever, it runs up against, a brick wall if it gets over to the Senate. But we have cut spending. But people say, well, why are we still running a deficit? Our deficit's down. I think we were at $1.2 billion 3 years ago. Now our deficit funding is somewhere around $400 billion. Part of it's because of we're bringing in more tax revenue than we ever have historically. The other thing is when the 63% of the spending is just on autopilot. That's where we're running into problems, and that's where we're going to continue to run into problems. So we start addressing those issues, and that's all entitlements. And I know folks don't like to hear that word, but entitlements is anything that's passed by law, like Social Security, Medicare, but there's other entitlements that are out there as it relates to our VA benefits, but also entitlements to folks that have not earned them. Everything from food stamps to all of those types of issues. Those are all the things that are driving up the cost of what we're spending. So until we actually address those and talk about them, we're trying to do that through the Farm Bill in regards to the SNAP spending that has more than quadrupled, I think, in the last 5 to 6 years, or doubled in the last 5 or 6 years. Until you start talking about, and that's an entitlement spending, until you start talking about that, we're going to continue to have deficit spending. So the debt limit increase is basically what we've already spent, and to raise it is what we've already spent and committed to spend. Our service members and Department of Defense have taken huge cuts, took 50% of the cuts to sequester. And they took a $50 billion cut before that, 2 years prior to that. So we're cutting, but the problem is it's not sustainable what we're spending. And Sonny hit it on the spot. Is how can we continue to spend more than we bring in? You can't. Sooner or later, we're going to pay that piper. You can't. We're at $17 trillion in debt. Sooner or later, the interest rates are going to rise, and that's when we're going to really be in a pickle, because you're going to have to take away from that discretionary spending again if we don't start talking about the mandatory spending. And listen, there's areas I think we could cut. Foreign aid. Obviously, it's $1 billion. We could make cuts to Department of Education nationally. We could do some things, but that still doesn't meet our deficit spending. It is a small it's a percentage of our deficit spending, but it's not enough to get us out of deficit spending and start paying down our debt. So we got to look at the long-term, cost drivers here.
The phone lines are open if you would like to speak to U.S. Representative Richard Nugent. Again, just so you know, if you're listening to a live show, we are talking on Monday, November 18th, 2013, and your calls are welcome and invited. The number is 622-9622-622-WOCA if you'd like to be on the air asking a question. Can I switch tracks a little bit and ask about Congress and the fracking phenomenon, the idea that we're getting a lot of oil now in this country, and there are certain people who want that to be stopped, other people who say, no, don't stop it. How is it affecting anything in Congress?
Well, we're going to be passing some legislation this week that, allows for, states, again, to do the things that they need to do as it relates to, exploration for natural gas and oil. And the other thing, it's about the gas pipeline. We're going to be doing some work on that. You got folks that would like us to stop fracking, and at the end of the day, that is what is giving us the ability to start moving towards energy independence, particularly as it relates to oil and natural gas. The federal government has not allowed us, there are not any new permits for any exploration for natural gas or oil on federal land, and all of the increase in oil production and natural gas production has been off of private land. And I think, once again, states are in a better position to make decisions as it relates to fracking within their borders. And this administration is fully against that. I mean, we're subsidizing ethanol, to replace some of the oil for, energy production as it relates to driving our cars. And it is the most, wasteful of a food product, corn, and it's highly subsidized. So it's costing us more money to produce it than the benefit that we get out of it. So there are so many things the federal government's doing that is counter what would be productive for us and provide us with a stable, energy production.
The again, changing the conversation, the decision by the president to allow the insurers who had dropped coverage from some of their customers, let's see, I guess the Democratic side is saying that those plans were substandard, which is why they were being dropped in the first place. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, were the insurance companies really selling substandard plans?
Some of them were. There's no doubt that some of them were, but what it is they're not meeting the mandates that this administration has set forth in regards to covering, abortion or covering, birth control measures that we're not under, currently under most of your, medical insurance policies. So, and that's what, some of the religious organizations have a lot of angst over, is the fact that they're being forced over to pay for things they feel immorally reprehensible to them. But so the policies, there are some policies that were probably substandard, but there are some that just didn't have those types of things included. And so, what the president did, I think, is absolutely, using the executive order privilege way too often. The law, I believe, is the law. The law clearly set forward the fact that they was going to force insurance companies to cancel. He did it. He didn't do it for the right reasons. He did it for political reasons, to save certain members of Congresses that are facing tough re-elections in 2014. He's doing it to save them, not doing it to help people, the folks that need it the most. And let me tell you, I've been doing a lot of tele-town halls, and I'm hearing from a lot of folks about their insurance coverage being canceled. And this is insurance coverage that they felt comfortable with, that they wanted, that they could afford, and they felt that they were, it was okay for them. But listen, I sat there last week arguing on committee of rules with the Democrat Pallone, who was, he basically said, I know better than everybody else. I know better than people in your district as to what they think they need. And you know what? He didn't care that they canceled their insurance. He says, and he said this, I don't care. It's on YouTube. I don't care. That, to me, I just can't believe how elite you feel that you know better than folks that are spending their money for a product.
Yeah, the whole mess with the signing up website. It just is there an end to it anytime soon, or are things being fixed?
I think that the more this is just a smidgen of policies going to get canceled. He delayed it, and the reason we voted on doing it is we wanted to put it into law, at least delay, because the way he utilizes his executive orders. I mean, what he waives today, he could waive again and say, guess what, I was just kidding, a month from now when the political pressures back off, and stick it to these people again. This isn't the way you do it. This legislation was poorly thought out, poorly written. It's obviously being poorly implemented. But I think the problems go even further than the rollout. I think that what we're going to see is that it's going to be ripe for fraud, use, and that people are going to have their identities compromised, and it's going to cost regular folks a lot of problems.
Okay. Again, we're speaking with Congressman Richard Nugent, U.S. Representative Richard Nugent, and your calls are invited. Today is Monday, November 18th. I tell you the date so that you know if you're listening to a live show, and it looks like you have a live caller. Good morning. You're on the air with Congressman Nugent.
Good morning, Congressman. This is Sonny again.
Hey, Sonny.
Basically, I didn't retire. I'm changed occupations. I'm a professional patient. And the doctors I go to every one of them are totally against this care, and they said trying to implement what is required of them via the having to digitize or computerize everything is actually hurting into their they can't see as many patients, et cetera, et cetera. They're totally against it, and their reimbursements are being cut, and what their services they're allowed to give. They're being mandated as what services they can give. I hang up with you on. Thank you.
Yes, Sonny. I mean, you're on the mark again. We had a forum up in Ocala. I want to say a month and a half, 2 months ago at the most, where we had probably 50 or 60 local physicians, and we were talking about what they're feeling from this federal mandated health insurance, but and you hit it on the head, man. Let me tell you something. The reporting requirements are huge. It's costing them just a lot of time and energy to meet them. They're seeing a restriction in how they treat their patients, and it's just going to lead to poor quality health care, and that's what they're afraid of. And one of the questions. One of the physicians asked the entire group, this is 50 or 60 other physicians, asked them, how many of you would encourage one of your sons or daughters to go into medicine? And only one physician raised his hand out of that whole group. And he raised his hand, he said, not because he would really tell them to do that, but it was a moral obligation to be a physician. But other than that, he said financially he would.
Oh wow, that's kind of troubling.
And so, listen, that kind of foresees the future of healthcare in America.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And that's what was concerning these docs, was that it really forebodes, I think, a negative picture of what our healthcare is going to look like in the next few years.
Yeah, I thought from the beginning that doctors should have more of a say-so in this than they were having.
Well, they weren't. They were, doctors in hospitals weren't really part of the mix when they wrote this law. Even though the AMA was there, but it accounts for less than 10% of the practicing physicians. So they didn't really have a voice at the table.
Wow.
I was at one of the cancer centers here in Ocala here 2 weeks ago. And let me tell you, the stories that they're telling us about how Affordable Health Care Act is affecting them and their patients, and how it's going to drive up the cost actually of medical care, because a lot of it's going to be forced over to hospitals that cost more to treat than outpatient-wise. It is bleak. I'm concerned as a consumer, as Sonny mentioned, but I'm concerned as a consumer of if I need a doctor and I need treatment, I want this decision to be between me and my doctor.
Yeah.
I don't want the federal government being inserted anywhere in between this thing.
All right, let's go back Let's go back to the phone, Congressman. Good morning. Sure. Thank you for waiting. You're on there with Congressman Nugent.
Hi, this is Ken. My question is about the Keystone Pipeline. What's the status of that, and what is Congress doing to maybe push that along? And I'll hang up and listen to your answer.
All right, thank you.
Well, actually, this week there is a natural gas pipeline permitting act that we're going to be voting on. I think it's end of the week, and so it's about the Permitting Reform Act as introduced. So it really is talking about the Keystone project. But we've pushed through legislation and pushed on the administration at every opportunity we have as Keystone. And the administration keeps changing, moving the goalpost on that. If you remember, just the last problem was the route. They've fixed the route. They've gotten the states to support the route changes, and now they're dragging their feet again, trying to come up with some other reason why not to approve this pipeline. And let me tell you, that pipeline actually has some local effects right in Marion County that produces these huge pumps that will move that oil. But in talking to that group, they said, "Listen, we're going to do okay either way because it looks like they're going to sell their oil, and they're going to either sell it to us, the United States, and move it here, or they're going to move it east or west and sell it directly to China, and they'll load it on ocean-going freighters and take it to China."
Huh.
But at the end of the day, if it goes to China, that doesn't help us in the United States at all.
Yeah,
it doesn't help us, keep that North American energy product here in North America.
Let's see if we can squeeze in one more phone call before the time is up. Good morning. You're on the air.
Hey, Larry. Hey, Senator. How you doing?
How you doing?
I just wanted one quick question, if I could. Back to Obamacare, if you don't mind. You know how President, he gave it to a Canadian company, and now $650 million, whatever, to do this website? Does he not have to go through congressional approval to get this? And why didn't he go through an American company? Because he's preaching, bringing jobs to America.
Restate that again. I was
the Obamacare, the website?
The
he gave it to a Canadian company to make
it? The Obamacare website, okay, yeah.
It's $650 million to a Canadian company to make the website?
Right.
How come he didn't give it to an American company since he's preaching bringing jobs to America?
Ah, okay.
I wasn't aware that it was a Canadian firm, but it doesn't surprise me that this president, I mean, think about it. He had, for the small business group or the business, that tried to expand business in America, he had the CEO of GE that pays absolutely no taxes and has moved more jobs off the U.S. coast, and he had him as one of his principal advisors in regards to creating more jobs in America. I mean, that's how ridiculous this president is. Like I said, this first I heard it was a Canadian firm, and because I was more, focused on regards to how we can actually get rid of this abomination. But that's one of the things. When I get back to D.C. today, actually, I'm going to ask my staff to brief me on, because I'd like to know more about it, because that has been obviously the rollout of Obamacare is what's killing them, and I'll tell you, that's what the Democrats are scared to death of right now. Is the whole thing has just blown up in their face, from the rollout of Obamacare to the cancellation of people's health insurance when they were specifically told, and the president now has apologized.
Right.
But think about this. Had we known all these things, I think we did know it, and we were pretty vocal about the issues over 2 years ago. But until proof's in the pudding, so when this stuff is actually happening, had this happened a year ago, and I think this is the reason why they delayed the rollout of this until after the general election of last year. We may have had a different outcome in the Senate and
yes,
President.
There's
no doubt in my mind.
I think you're exactly right. Any plans on having a town forum anytime in between now and next week or the end of the year? And
we've been doing. We just did one up in Ocala, a telephone town hall, which allows us to do it even when we're up in D.C. So we just did one in, I think this time it was in Sumter County. Last time was 2 weeks ago. It was in Ocala, Marion County area. So we can reach out and touch more people that way. It's been very, very helpful.
Well, let us know when the next one is. We'll be glad to announce it on your behalf.
Appreciate it.
Congressman, thank you for being on the air with us and doing this each week. I know it's hard, always it's not always easy for you because of your schedule, but our listeners appreciate it.
I just want to say one last thing is this last week something came out of the Secretary of Defense Hagel, who is now advocating to cut benefits and salaries for our active duty members of the military, and I'm just going to tell you that I'm going to do everything in my power to fight against that. I can't believe that the guy who should be advocating for our men and women who are putting their lives at risk for us is talking about cutting their pay.
Yeah, no question. Well, that's a good final thing to end on. Thank you for all you do for all of us, Congressman, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks again. Thank you.
All right. We'll be right back.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA. Ocala.
ABC News Now. I'm Karen Chase. New milestones reached on Wall Street. The Dow topped 16,000 for the first time, and the S&P reached 1,800 on the wings